Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me for Mindshare Matters. Today's guest is a powerhouse of a human being, Heather Mercier, a wonderful friend, a wonderful human, and an amazing, amazing executive. Heather was born in a small village in Illinois and has built an incredible career with an incredible journey, and I'm so excited to share it with you. Let's go. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Mindshare Matters. Today's guest is the one and only Heather Mercier. Heather, thank you so much for joining me.
Yes.
Thanks for making the time.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
So we traditionally now start at the very beginning, Heather, and say, where were you born? And give us some context on what it was like growing up.
Where did it all start?
Where did it all start?
So I was actually born right outside of Washington, D.C. in Fort Belvoir, Virginia. My dad was stationed at the Pentagon. But when I was young, he retired from the Air Force. He went to the Air Force Academy and was a colonel in the Air Force. And so he was at the Pentagon. And he retired because he didn't want to miss my sister and my childhood.
Oh.
Yeah, and so he retired and we moved back to Illinois where both he and my mom were from. So went from, DC to a small town of 750 people. So that's where I grew up in Hennepin, Illinois. Hennepin, yes. It's a village, technically.
Is it really?
Yes, it's not even a town. It wasn't a stoplight in the entire county that I grew up in. Not just my town, the entire county. So growing up in a town that small many parts of it were idyllic, right? Where it was just, come home when the streetlights come on and, there were 3 or 4 little parks and elementary school was in our town. So it was great. But then I will say as a contrast, after I graduated from college, I moved to New York and I realized really quickly how growing up in a very small town, my husband and I, what we say is you have default friends, right?
I like that, default friends.
Right, there aren't that many people to choose from, so you kind of have to fit into the crowd, right? And so looking back, there was probably a lot of that in my childhood of just, who do I need to be in this very small group of people? So,
And how old were you when you made the transition to Illinois?
Oh, young. I was 2 and a half.
So you really grew up
there.
Yeah.
Totally grew up there. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So anyone who knows you would guess your birth order, but tell us your birth order.
Yes, I'm second. I'm second, but I'm taller and much louder than my sister. And we're only 18 months apart. So we're really close in age, but many people guess that I'm older. Just because I'm taller. So for some reason they think if I'm taller at, over 40, if I'm still growing or something, right? It would be, if I'm taller, I must be older.
Funny.
But yeah, I have a much more outgoing personality, which I think is a birth order thing now that I have kids. I don't know.
Well, and your focus on achievement and ambition and everything, it's amazing. But I do think the dynamics of 2 are very different than the dynamics of 3. Because in the dynamics of 2, the stereotype is you have the oldest and the youngest who sort of have the ambition and the drive.
Right.
Some would argue the youngest is spoiled. I'm not going to accuse you of that.
Well, I would argue the oldest is spoiled.
Yes.
Yeah.
Coming from an oldest myself. But, so both of you, so your sister was a little older. So both of you were really young, and really your memories were made in Illinois.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And then how did you choose where you were going to go to college and how, coming from Illinois?
So when college came around, the studious part of me was always what came easy. So that was kind of how I defined myself. I definitely was the like wild one of the two of us. My sister did not do anything wrong. So I just had to be different.
That wasn't sarcastic. That was a real comment.
No, that was real. That was real. She, very, but we both had, straight A's and good grades, but on the social aspect, she was straight and narrow where I was the wild one. But I only pushed it so far because the studious part of me, that was important. Like I didn't want to lose that.
Yeah.
So when it came to college, I originally thought I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy because my dad went there. And so I applied, and then...
I've never heard that before.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then when it came to, okay, you need to get your senator to write a letter and go to this place in Chicago for the physical part, I was like... then the wild part of me, I was like, I think I wanted just a college experience with, partying and having fun. So backed out of that. And then, I had some dreams of going out of state, but I just decided to go to University of Illinois. It was a big school, good academics.
Absolutely.
I had a full scholarship. So it was 2.5 hours away. So it was enough distance where I had my space.
So you were a straight A student in high school before you went to UIUC. How do you say it? UIUC? How do they say it there? It's Urbana-Champaign?
Yeah, it is Urbana. It is UIUC, but there you just say U of I.
U of I. That's the cool thing to say.
That's the cool thing, yeah.
In high school, before we transitioned to your college experience, so you were a straight A student.
You can stop saying that now.
I just want to remind everybody you're a straight A student. What sort of crowd were you in? We all have the stereotypical crowds that we are forced into.
Yeah, I mean, again,
it's a small town, small
52
village.
in my graduating class.
That's it.
Yeah.
So you were probably the jock and the nerd.
I played sports. School was important. I mean, everybody knew that school was important to me, but I didn't want people to think that, right? So I tried to. I didn't want to be in the nerdy, the nerd group. I don't want to use those words. They sound terrible, but if there's only 52 kids. It's like...
It's okay. Anyone who listens to this is a nerd.
Okay, good. Okay. So we fit in. Yeah, I wanted to be in kind of that other crowd, but I will say it was really hard for me to fit in there because I still listened to my parents and followed the rules, and it was really hard for me, actually. Because... just the drinking and the kind of I can remember one person, this one girl that I was good friends with, but I had to work so hard at being her friend.
Wow.
Because she just, it was just different, right? When I had to be home at midnight, it was like, no, I want to be home at midnight. Why do you care? I don't have a curfew, right? So, but I remember that a lot about in high school, really trying to fit in really hard.
It's interesting that you had that strong an inner compass your whole life. You always sort of.
Yeah, it's something, and over the years I've worked on cultivating. I don't know if that's the right word, but getting more in touch. But for sure, I've always had a very strong, but that I can look back and know very specific times in my life when I was fighting against it, right? Where I knew it was wrong, but I was still kind of no, I want to be cool, but I'm not cool.
You've always been cool.
No.
You've always been cool. So you go to Urbana-Champaign, and what do you study, and what's the experience like? Because that's a much, much larger city.
Oh, yes.
Relatively speaking.
Yeah, I mean, when I was there, I think it was 35,000 undergrad.
Wow.
Yeah, but it was always that was great for me. I did not have any problems with that. But it was much more of just desperately trying to fit into this kind of female, different mold and not that I don't associate with being female, but this different thing, different mold that it wasn't me, but it was sororities and all this stuff.
Trying to figure out what you meant by
just in the and also body image stuff and didn't very much chasing boys and if I would have followed my gut, I was more interested in just do my schoolwork, graduate, and go to New York, really, is what I kind of always wanted to do. So
You knew that even as an 18-year-old. Wow.
yeah. One Halloween, I don't know how old I was, but at some, pre-high school age, I dressed up as a CEO for Halloween. I am not shitting you.
That's awesome.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yes.
That's so Heather.
Yeah, it is so Heather. Yes. So.
And why New York when you're coming from this little town in Illinois?
This is a honest to God story. I was at the orthodontist, so probably 13, 14, and he was working, changing my rubber bands or whatever, and he was talking to his nurse, the orthodontist, about his son that had moved to New York to do investment banking and was working 150 hours a week, and I decided right then that that's what I was going to do.
That's awesome.
Like that. It's so demented.
It sounds good.
But
150 hours a week.
I mean, I had no concept of what that was, right? And even now, if an employee at our company says to me, "I'm working 60 hours a week," I'd be like, "Do you realize how hard it is to work? The hours you're working every day?" Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly.
That's 8 to 8
exactly.
with no lunch.
Exactly, right? And it's like, are you really working 8 to 8 with no lunch? But so I had no concept of what that meant, and I don't know how many hours I worked when I lived in New York, but I was at the office till 6 a.m. many nights and came home and showered and went back to the office. So it was probably not 150 though, but I mean.
It sounds good though.
Yeah, it sounds good. Demented for someone 13, 14 to be like, that's what I want to do.
There are so many topics I want to cover here, but I really want to dig in on, I would have never guessed that you ever struggled fitting in.
Oh yeah.
And so I'd love to dig in just a little bit on that because sincerely, not what I would have expected.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I'd love to hear about the struggle that you imply you faced with fitting in.
I mean, I placed a lot of my worth, and I have done a lot of work. You know this. I've done a lot of woo-woo, whatever you want to call it, work on this. And I placed a lot of worth on what other people thought of me. When I was growing up, and even into my 20s until even into my 20s, but and that looking back, I can see that and how hard it was, and going through sorority rush. U of I has, at the time, I don't know if this stat is still true, but the largest Greek system in the nation.
Wow,
there's 40, 50 some sororities that you have to go through.
Wow.
During the first stage of rush. And, you're like going through these, being like, pick me, and it's so hard. And then you get just turned down and turned down and turned down and turned down. And I was in a sorority, and it just felt so awful because that's what my worth was wrapped up in, right? It was like what other people thought. And so
I know you don't have a daughter, but if you had a daughter, what would you tell her?
Well, even my sons, I mean, I see it, especially with my 13-year-old. I've seen him try to fit in. He's more sensitive. He's small, and I talk to them about that. Your worth is inside, and you're special no matter what anybody says. And why do I love you because of who you are, not because of anything that you do, not because of any grade or not because of any sport or So it's. But I even talk to female, employees a lot about getting down on themselves, and I can see that kind of coming out of people. A lot of humans, we wrap our worth up in external things, right?
Yeah,
where,
absolutely.
You're just worthy because you are. So.
I mean, not that we should or can cover it today, but I do think it's unfortunate that I think we all know this, but I think it deserves being said that physical appearance professionally is much less of a factor. It's still a factor for men, but it's much less a factor for men than it is for women. And
for sure.
It's just the fragility of that zone that you have to be in professionally is horrible.
For sure. Yeah.
and I'm sure this will come up again as you now start your professional career, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on jumping into New York. And what did you major in, by the way?
Finance.
Naturally.
Yeah. Yeah. I love math. I've always loved math. So even though one of our board members always tells me CFOs should never do math in public, because we'll be in a board meeting and they'll be like, oh, well, and he'll be like, don't say it, because the CFO can never be wrong when it comes to a math problem. I'm like, thank you. Awesome. But yeah, I love math.
So did you literally apply only in New York City for jobs, or?
I applied to one job in Chicago.
Okay.
But then everything else was in New York.
And where did you end up your first gig after college?
So investment banking in New York at Prudential Securities. I couldn't even remember for a second.
Hey,
So.
And was it 150 hours a week?
You know what? I didn't even have a concept then of the hours, but it was on a normal day. It was 9 to 8, 7 or 8. And it was fine because that was your life, right?
That's what you do in New York City.
Exactly.
When you're building your career.
Yeah, exactly. And they'd order dinner in every night, and you expensed it, and you'd got a black car home, and it was just. But there were plenty of nights where you're there all night and go home, shower, and come back in the morning. But it's insane. It's so dumb. Nobody's saving lives. Nobody, it's crazy. It was crazy, but I'm glad I got to experience it.
And was it what you thought it would be a year into it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You loved it.
Yeah, I loved it, and I learned so much. So much.
Could we revisit, and again, I don't want to make this about being a woman. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. You happen to be. Being a woman in investment banking, I know it wasn't that long ago. But that long ago.
Right. Yeah.
What was that like? Did you feel the same insecurities around getting accepted or being well received? No. So it was a college thing.
But I got my job because of this.
Yeah.
I think. No one ever made me feel like I got my job because of the way I looked. Where trying to get into a sorority felt absolutely like I was being chosen because of the way I looked, or like my social, was I fun enough?
That's
right?
Horrible.
Right? Yeah. Was my personality good enough? Where in New York and work has always felt like I am who I am because of my brain, not my looks. And I honestly, and I think I've shared this with you before, I have never had a concept of I have less or more because I'm a female. And it's only probably been in the last 5 years maybe that I have forced myself to pay attention more and to be more aware, because I feel that in my position, there aren't that many, especially in Utah, executive women, and that I need to be more present to this. But I've never in my life did I feel, except once when I was working in private equity, they did say to me, they were like, they wanted me to stay so bad. I wanted to leave to have kids, and they wanted me to stay. And they said, we do not pay for anyone to go back to business school, but we probably would for you because we need more female partners. And it didn't even bother me at the time, but it probably been like, really should have been. Yeah, you know what I mean? But that's really the only time, right, that I can, so.
Again, you're wired for investment banking, but you decided not to do that forever.
Well, I got laid off, because 9/11. So after 9/11, yep, exactly. So after about 6 months after 9/11, they shut down the whole bank and decided, Peru did, to just be research focused and on the equity side. And at that time, then I was really fortunate. Within 2 weeks, I got a job at another firm, but it was much more restructuring focused because the debt markets had crashed and people were going bankrupt, and this was Adelphia and I'm trying to think of the other big one that happened, but like all these, telecoms and all sorts of scandals and everything. So I did that, but I don't know that I probably wouldn't have left investment banking had that not happened, because I was enjoying it. I liked it.
So had that not happened, you might have not even ended up in Utah for the last.
No, because I knew that you did investment banking for 2 to 3 years. Like that's the cycle. Like I knew in my head that's what you do, and then you either go back to business school or you go to private equity. Like that's, and I didn't know that going into New York. I was so naive. Like coming from Illinois, I got this job in investment banking, and I was in an analyst class with all these people from the East Coast that were like, no, this is like, you do this for 2 years, then you go to Columbia or Stanford or Harvard, and then you go to private equity. And I was like, what? Who teaches this to you? Like, do you learn this in high school? Like,
where's the playbook?
Exactly,
Is it hidden somewhere?
Because it was like, my parents didn't tell me this. So I learned very quickly what you do. And when I went to restructuring, that was very different. And so actually getting my job in private equity in Boston was really hard because my background was different. It wasn't the 3 years of investment banking, 2 years of private equity, business school. Like that's the kind of...
I love the fact that you mentioned it just a few minutes ago. You've never felt like being a woman was something that defined you necessarily. Or that,
right.
How do you believe that there are expectations, and I'm not trying to lead you, I'm sorry. How have you managed the expectations of being a mom and a significant other with being a high-powered executive? And do you have a take that might be unconventional, or what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, my take, and so let me just answer the question in my position today, and then rewind 10 years, when I was having my second. But today, my take is, and everybody knows this, my family's first. There's no question. And I do a really good job balancing, and I have an amazing partner in Chuck that, he allows me to do what I do many times, in most cases, right? Yeah. But I have learned that like everything is you just have to have priorities, and I don't mean that you have to have your priorities straight. I'm just saying if I have to make a choice between a meeting and a baseball game, I'm gonna choose the baseball game and just say like I want to be there, and but I'll start at 7 to make that meeting happen, right? It's so it's like, it's not that I don't give and take, or I'll do the meeting at 8:00 at night after the game is over, right? But it's so that's easy, right? I'm one of the most senior people at the company. Yeah. I can make my own schedule at this point. Yeah. But I would so when I was having my second son, I was working for a company in Jackson Hole, and it was a scheduled C-section. And I was leaving the next morning. The C-section was the next morning, and I was on a business call, and we were selling a business. And the guy said, "Okay, can we follow up tomorrow or something?" And I was like, "Well, I'm giving birth tomorrow morning, literally." But I'm like, "Let's just talk. Let's talk at like 4." And he's like, "Are you kidding me?" And it kind of like smacked me in the face of like, come on, Heather, like, let's give a little bit more attention to your unborn child. Like, I just, sometimes I get in that like business mode where it's so, and so I mean, it's not always been easy. Like I haven't always drawn clear boundaries when I should have. So I don't know. But my take generally has always been, my family is my first priority. And, but I'll still work as hard, if not harder, than anybody else you hire, but.
I really appreciate that. And I appreciate your reference to Chuck, because that seems to be the pattern, whether man or woman.
For sure. It's
that sort of delicate balance of having the support of another partner and somehow balancing it all. And
absolutely.
That seems to be consistent.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
I will say, my mother-in-law was telling me once that we were back in, well, actually I wasn't there. I stayed in Utah because I was working, but it was in the summer, and Chuck took the kids back to Illinois when both of our parents still lived there for like 3 weeks. And my mother-in-law told me that they had a friend over at the house, and Hank was probably 4 at the time. And he was saying to them, yeah, my mom works, but my dad is a stay-at-home dad because they don't want us to be with someone else. They want one of the parents to be with us. And I was like, my kid was like, it's so funny though that they pick that stuff up, It was really cute when she told me that. So I like that.
I think it's so cool. And I think, imagine what you're teaching your 2 boys around their perception of women, their perception of what a significant other for them would be like.
Yeah.
It's so impressive.
Well, and I left private equity to have kids. And I thought that I didn't know what having kids was going to do to me. My mom was a teacher. As far as I was concerned, she was a stay-at-home mom because she was always there for, she was there when I was home, whenever I was home. And so I left and realized when my first son was about 6 months old that I really missed working. And it was a very hard kind of looking in the mirror and saying, I literally remember standing in the mirror and saying it out loud to myself because I felt like such a bad mom. But I knew a better mom, better wife, like that's, it's a part of me, and it's good for my kids, right? To see it. And I'm there for them. I don't even worry at all about being there for them. So
Heather, now that you have all the success that you've had and will continue to have, if you were to think about what your superpower is, if you were to sort of identify, this is the thing that has allowed me to get to this point, this is the thing that has allowed me to go from coming from a little village in Illinois to being the CFO of one of the most successful SaaS companies in Utah. What is the superpower?
Well, I don't know if early in my career, if it was just horsepower and brain power and grit, because I definitely didn't associate with how I'm going to answer back then.
Yeah.
But there was probably this, but it's empathy. Like and in the last 5 years, I will say, my success and career I was successful before, but it has, like, I have helped our company become more successful because I allow that part of me I don't cage it, right? Like, I use feeling when I run the business. And I've always kind of had that. Like, I could, even as a 21-year-old going into a meeting in New York, like, I could read the room. Like, I knew what was happening, and I might not have been confident enough to speak up, but that confidence came, right, as I got more confident. By the time I was in Boston, 10, I don't know what that was, 5 years into my career, I was confident enough to speak up in meetings. And when I could read the room, I would say things to, change the mood of the room. And I think that helped me a lot.
Some assume that once you've achieved this level of professional success, you're sort of there. You've made it. Do you have aspirations beyond this? And let's not talk in the next few years, like 10 years from now, 5 years from now. Do you have aspirations?
No, I don't know. I honestly, and we've talked about this before. I don't know. I don't know what's next. I know what I want to accomplish right now. Yeah. And I'm very committed to accomplishing that, but I don't know. It's so vast to me.
Do you feel like you were like that 10 years ago as well, or is that a new thing?
No, I think I feel 10 years ago, I would say, so I've been in my current, with my current company for a little over 8 years. And no, I would say 10 years ago, I didn't know. 10 years ago, I would have probably said, I want to be in like investing, right? Like private equity, investing in businesses. I felt very successful in those roles. And coming over the operating side, I never imagined how much I would Love it.
Oh, come on, seriously?
I didn't. I really didn't. I really.
No, I'm being sarcastic.
Okay.
I mean, come on, investment bankers have the nice, clean job. They're not in hand-to-hand combat like we are.
But
right?
it's like operations is so much more fulfilling.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, after doing what I've done, or you know this because you do this, you're a better investor having been an operator, hands down.
You understand it.
Oh my
You
gosh.
understand what it's like on the ground.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So.
Okay, I'm going to ask you, you don't know that I'm going to ask you this, but I would love for you to think about this and answer it as honestly as you're able to. What is your biggest regret? What is your biggest regret? A decision that you regret or a position you took that you regret? Could be recent, it could be older.
Actually, what I was going to say, and it's not as specific as a single decision, but honestly, what came to mind, so I'm just going to say it, is allowing, like, all the years that I like beat myself up and didn't know I was good enough, right? Didn't know my worth, because it's good years, right? Like I didn't love college. I didn't love high school. And I had fun, but I look back and there aren't there aren't memories where I'm like, oh, that was so amazing. You know, some people are like, I would love to go back to college, right? And no. And it just was, it wasn't fun. So that's a little different question than what you're saying, because I would go back and try and talk to that person,
Say what? Because some 21-year-old is listening now.
Yeah. You're worthy. You're good enough. I mean, don't listen to everybody it's so funny. I love when Greta, what's her last name? The environmentalist, the young girl. It's
yes.
Thorn. I'm going to say it wrong, so I'll just say Greta. But there's some meme that is I've seen on LinkedIn where it's like when they go after your looks, they have nothing left, right? And it's.
Oh, I love that.
Right. It's just like you have so many gifts. Everybody does, right? Focus. Yeah. I mean, it's not even focus on your gifts, like, because the way you look is a gift. It's who you're meant to be, right? So that's, but.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, the closing question, and I always have to say, aside from your family.
I've heard you say that before.
What are you most proud of?
The person I've become. Yeah, I have, like, I've had to go to like dark places inside of me that I've touched on, right? To let that go, to realize who I am, and I am so proud of that. Like I am so proud of that, and I want to be like a good human and connect with humanity and shine bright and all those things. And I am now, and it's literally been in the last 5 years. So
thanks for that candid answer, and
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm sincerely so grateful of all of the support and friendship that you've shown me as I ventured here and on this journey, but
ditto.
everything you've done for everyone else.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Heather.
Yes,
Thanks
of
for the
course.
chat. Thanks for making the time.
Yes, thank you for having me.